Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. We crack the code so you don't have to.
Welcome to the Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. I am here with a fantastic guest. All of our guests are fantastic, by the way. If you're just joining in for the first time, make sure you share the podcast with your friends, you subscribe. We have Aubrey Bergauer, who is the founder and CEO of Change the Narrative. So Aubrey, I had a chance to see when I was attending a completely different event. Your event was happening in the same facility. And I saw the sign that spoke about your book and what you're doing career-wise, and I was just astounded by your work. So I'm glad to have you on the program.
Oh, thanks for having me. I have to say, I feel like it was really fortuitous that we ran into each other in the lobby and we were like, oh, you talk business, I talk business.
And you were in from California, and so visiting Texas.
Born and raised in Texas.
Born and raised in Texas.
Yeah, it was nice to be home for a bit. Yeah.
So tell me about your organization.
So Changing the Narrative is, in short, it's a consulting firm for performing arts organizations. But let me zoom way out to set the stage, so to speak. I started a blog 10 years ago called Changing the Narrative. And I started that blog when I was chief executive of an orchestra here in California. It's called the California Symphony. And I just think so many things in classical music need to change, particularly how we run our operations and how we need to optimize the business model of classical music. And there's a lot to say and unpack about how to do that. But I started this blog because, you know, most people, even if you don't love classical music or aren't as familiar with arts and culture, most people understand that this is an art form that many would say it's on the decline by many metrics. Our audiences have been decreasing over the last several decades. And you know, this has been my passion my whole life. And I thought, why does it have to be that way? Can we challenge those assumptions? Can we buck those trends? So we started doing a lot of things differently. My whole career has been in these offstage management roles. And we doubled our audience, nearly quadrupled the donor base, and through a whole bunch of different strategies we can talk about. And so I started blogging about it, again, 10 years ago, thinking, okay, I want to share this with my industry. I want to do this as a service to the field, share these things that are working. And then over time, that led into the side hustle of the speaking and some consulting. And then 6 years ago now, I made the side hustle the main hustle, named the business the same thing, Changing the Narrative. So here we are.
Now, so that's intriguing to me. I'd actually love for you to walk us through those strategies that you implemented, because you're right. You're in a marketplace that is kind of hard. You're relying on people to really buy into your art form and then invest their hard-earned funds to come to an event that you're putting on. What did you do? Like, how did you find the right strategic vehicle for getting people in the door again and rebuilding that community?
Everything you're asking is spot on. I mean, it's all the questions I was asking too, like, how do we do this? And so a statistic that is so prevalent in classical music, this has been this way for over 10 years now. Actually, even it was probably 5 years old at the time, 10 years ago when I started writing this blog, is that, you know, we say as an industry in classical music, we need new audiences. Probably everybody listening is like, yeah, classical music needs new audiences. They need younger audiences. And yet the statistic I had learned was that up to 90% of people who come for the first time to a symphony orchestra never return.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
How much?
9 out of 10, 90%, up to 90%. The bigger the budget, the bigger the orchestra, the more likely that is true, actually.
Oh my gosh.
And I know, right? This is what I was thinking too. I was like, oh my gosh. And I mean, I realized like, this is not a new audiences problem. We're getting new audiences. This is a retention problem. Right. And when 9 out of 10 of your first timers don't come back, they can't do the steps you just said. Buy in. Again, come again, buy a subscription, eventually donate. If they don't come a second time, if we're a one and done, you know, first date, no thanks ever again, then we have lost out on so much future revenue that we need to fund our art. And so when I first learned that statistic, that came from the League of American Orchestras. They had done this big study they called the Churn study. And this finding, it just really struck me in the same way your reaction was just now. What? You know? And so I set out to try to figure out as best as I knew how at the time, why is this happening?
Sure.
And so we ran the numbers for our orchestra. And sure enough, our first timer retention rate it wasn't as low as 10%, but it was like 12 to maybe 14% of any given concert, those people would come back within a year. And I thought, okay, that's that's pretty bad. We can make that better, but how? So to answer your question on what were the strategies, there were two big ones. The first one was start working on retention.
Okay.
And if we're getting people in the door, that's great. We just need to figure out how do we retain them. And so I developed a retention model that 6 years later is now trademarked. It's called the long haul model. And it's about how do we take somebody on a user journey so that they have a behavioral based next step. So what do I mean by that? Sure. So often, we talk about our audiences in terms of either demographic behavior. We need younger audiences. We need more diverse audiences, and there's nothing wrong with that, or we talk about our audiences in terms of psychographic segmentation. Oh, these are the people who like the movie concerts, but these are the people who like the classics like Beethoven.
Right.
And yeah, none of that's bad, but the research tells us the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Mm-hmm. And so what happens when you normally go to could be a symphony concert, could be a museum, could be anywhere. You go to a cultural event for the first time. Then what happens? To a lot of people, it's usually you get a phone call asking for a donation. Right. And it's like, yeah, I see your smile, Ronnie. Yeah. And so it's like, using the date analogy, it's like we just went on the first date. Now you're asking to get married. Right. And so there's all kinds of different offers we bombard people with. They come once and then we're like, yeah, do you want to make a donation? Do you want to buy a subscription? We're so savvy with our digital marketing and our tracking cookies. We're going to slam you with ads for the next concert. And it's like all these different messages somebody is getting just because they came once and expressed some interest in trying our product. And then we just bombard them with all these different upsells. And I realized that is not, if we're talking about patron behavior or consumer behavior, that's not a very logical progression. And so I developed this model based on other research in the field. We know if we can get somebody to come a second time within 12 months, this is another field-wide study, their lifetime value skyrockets. And so I thought, fine, the next step is just come back again. And I said, we're not going to solicit them for anything else. We're not going to sell them anything else except an invitation to come back again. And there's a couple ways you can do that in different channels and things. Mm-hmm. Okay. Then when somebody comes back a second time, then we know from the research in our field, they're a top prospect for a subscriber. So now we can sell them maybe a 3 concert package, or it doesn't have to be buy the whole 18, 20 week or however many, concerts in a subscription you could do, but let's sell them a small package. And then once they have a subscription, this is another big hurdle drop off point, which is that the first year renewal rates for subscriptions are about 50%. Okay. So it's like, okay, so then same thing. Let's still not solicit them for a donation. Let's only ask them to renew that subscription. We did a lot to try to figure out how do we make a better onboarding process, because the best step to renewing a subscription or a membership is to have a better onboarding. So we really tackled that. And then eventually the last data point for this customer journey I'll share is that we know once somebody is a second year subscriber, we've gotten them over that first year hurdle. Right. Once they're a second year subscriber or longer, their retention is super high, 80, 85, 90%. And they're a top prospect for a donor at that point. And so I thought, okay, now we're talking about a systematic journey. Is everybody going to follow that path? No. But is it better than the upsell and ask you for this and this? And do you want to come to the gala? And it was like, okay. So by getting focused on that retention plan, I call it the long haul model because you're building relationships over time. That alone started making a difference.
That's amazing.
And then the second thing I'll share, I won't be as long-winded, but we also embarked on a user experience research project. I didn't even know it was called user experience research at the time, but just trying to understand people's pain points when they come to the orchestra. And just very briefly, I'll share, because it's probably no surprise to people listening, that we learned, they would read our website and they said, I feel like it's inside baseball. I don't know these words you're using. I don't know what a concerto is. I don't know what difference between romantic and baroque. Yeah. And it was like, right, we're talking to people like they're music majors. And when we talk about big systemic issues of decline in public music education in this country, it's like, no wonder grown, smart adults won't have that same kind of baseline knowledge. So anyways, I could go on and on this, but basically we learned we've got to be more welcoming, more inclusive, more just approachable in how we deliver our marketing and our products.
So I've been to quite a few concerts and orchestra, and I love it. I went to one recently, and it's interesting for the person that loves the music, for instance, but they don't know the technical terms. And so I was looking at this group thinking, I wonder what everyone else is thinking. So you had a little violin, and then you had a violin looking item that was a little bigger. And then you had a violin looking item that was bigger than the person, but they all had different names, right? But for that common person, it looks like just a big violin. Right?
Yeah, well, that's so true. And what I learned, I remember this, I've now repeated this user experience research several times, but that very first group we talked to, these were newcomers who we said, as we were recruiting people to participate, we're like, if you are smart, culturally aware, you frequent live entertainment experiences, but for whatever reason, you don't go to the symphony, we want to talk to you. And so we were able to recruit some people who said, yeah, I self-identify that way. And it was clear there were people who were like, I don't know the names of the instruments in the orchestra. And there's no shame in the game, but it was a real moment for me because I've been in music for so long, played an instrument growing up. I don't remember not knowing the names of the instruments in the orchestra. And there's a human bias about that where once you learn something, I forget the name of the bias, hindsight bias maybe, but once you learn something, you forget what it's like to not know that thing.
Totally. I've been talking about the same thing a lot from other business elements that for some people that have been in the business too long, it's hard for them to teach because they don't remember what it was like getting to the point that they are. Yeah, so you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And so it was just a real aha moment. I was like, no shame in the game. These are smart people and you don't know what you weren't taught. And so if they don't know the names in the orchestra, I can wow about public music education declining all day long. But I was like, it's on me and my orchestra to fill in this knowledge gap and fix it.
That's cool. So when you created your strategy and getting a person to come back for that second time, did you have to offer any discounted pricing to get them back in for that second time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, is the short answer. And there's a whole rabbit hole we could go down on discounting, and so many arts organizations, I think, don't use discounting as strategically as they could. It's usually like, oh, the seats haven't sold for the concert next weekend. Let's run a flash sale at the last minute to sell some seats. And then you're kind of training your audience. If they wait to buy, they get a deal. People who paid full price and bought in advance, which is what we want, then get penalized because they didn't wait. So never, ever do I discount that way. But yes, there are some strategic times along this patron journey I described where you really want to incentivize the behavior. And so, yes, when somebody comes the first time, now what I advise all my clients and organizations I work with, I'm like, give them a sweet deal. Like, we've just got to get them to come back again. And so 50% off, whatever it is, just give the deal at that point.
You know what's intriguing about it? And it is like selling a software, an app even, but creating not just an affinity, but a level of loyalty and appreciation for the product is part of the key. So discounting is a way to get there. You get them in, and for the grocery business, it's a lost lead, right? So you discount an item that people either need or really want. You get them in the store and they'll find something else that they like or want in these stores. So I presume it's the same thing. You get them in, you give them that great onboarding experience, which I want you to talk about, but you give them a good experience and they'll come back because they appreciate the art. Maybe they don't know the instruments, but they still appreciate the art form. Yeah. So that onboarding, it sounds like, is really key as well.
Yeah, onboarding is absolutely key because it's onboarding and just making the user experience better. Like, so many people would think, like, the user in my industry would think the user experience starts when they enter the concert hall, maybe. And it's like, no. The user experience starts when they're navigating the website, trying to even figure out if they're going to buy or not. And so in response to this feedback we were hearing, we thought, okay, we got to strip the music vocabulary words from our, website marketing copy. We have to strip the flowery language. That's kind of a real trope, I would say, in classical music, the beloved Brahms Second Symphony, or, when it's like, okay, we got to get rid of all that. Right. And we just need to talk about what we literally started saying on the website, what makes this concert interesting? Sure. And then just say, oh, well, actually, this is what was happening in the composer's life. And then they went on to write this piece of music and that's pretty cool. Or, whatever it is that makes the concert interesting. So that alone changed just click-through rates all the way to purchase, people understanding like, oh, okay, I see what this is about. Then let's see, onboarding for subscribers was a whole different, I think, set of maybe steps, because I mentioned that first year, and now I call it the first year cliff of subscriptions. Right. And oftentimes what happens at a performing arts organization is, if somebody buys some kind of season ticket package and becomes a subscriber, usually it's like the confirmation email, the ticket mailing, if they're still mailing physical tickets. Right. And then it's kind of like, see you there. Right. And then like some months later, we try to get you to renew and send you a renewal invoice. Right. And I was like, wow, there's so much opportunity to do more. And so we started doing things like reminding people, this sounds probably so basic to everybody listening, but like reminding people of their benefits of why they subscribed in the first place, because more people can use not just the product, not just attend, but if they can't make a concert and they take advantage of the free ticket exchange that they get as a subscriber, they're more likely to stick with it.
I was going to say that's a big deal. Even with sporting events now, the ability to transfer tickets. So if all of a sudden I can't come and I can transfer that ticket to a friend and it's really seamless, it makes it easier because I feel like I'm not losing money in the process. Someone is still going to enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so just realizing like, oh, we have this functionality in place and we have these benefits in place. It's helping people understand and remind them they can use it. And it is easy. Let's keep it easy. All those things you just said. And it's like, when we do that better up front, and then they utilize those benefits, even if they can't attend a performance, giving it to somebody else, not feeling like they've lost anything. That's a huge psychological shift for them, which makes them more likely to renew.
And I was just thinking, in your research, did you find also the need to have to explain what maybe an intermission is, for instance? Like, and what do you do when that happens? Like, it's like the halftime. And you could have multiple intermissions, right?
Yeah, I don't think people were confused about intermission, but similar, what people had questions about. This was such a game changer. This is the most simple thing, Ronnie, and I will do it for the rest of my life going forward. Yes. People were like, we learned in our focus group, our user experience research, they were like, we don't know how long each piece of music is. Right. So we're sitting there without any expectation. Is this a 45-minute symphonic work in 4 movements? Or is this a 10-minute, we call it the overture slot. And even that is a bunch of language. It's like, it's basically the opener, the short opener piece. Or is it something in the, it's like, okay. So they were like, we have no idea. We just want to know, am I like buckle up because it's going to be a long one or like 6-8 minutes and this piece is over. And so we just started putting in our program, and like the program book, the listings, like this piece of music is 8 minutes and 30 seconds.
That's incredible.
This piece of music is 3 movements and it's like 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes, or I don't know, I'm making this up, right? And so that alone, people were like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. This so set my listening expectations, reduced anxiety I had about not being able to follow along. And like I said, it's the simplest thing ever. And it cost $0 to do. But it was a game changer.
Here's what's fascinating. So I was just speaking to a group about a week ago, and I've been doing this now for 10, 20 years. That when I go into some of the companies and I go to their senior staff meeting and I find that they aren't even using an agenda in the meeting. It's just kind of a free-for-all around the table where they talk about their activities and their departments. And like you just mentioned, the simplest thing I do is let's have an agenda. Why? Because I want people to better prepare for the meetings. 2, I want them to go through some orderly discussion of what the relevant issues are. And 3, I want to be able to hold them accountable at the next meeting. So this is what we discussed last time. What's the follow-up on the last meeting? And it sounds like all you're doing is giving them an agenda with a time frame, which is incredible because it sets the expectation. So that's a huge, and you're right, it feels simple. And kind of to our point earlier, I've been doing that for so long that I forget that some people didn't grow up in their careers having something as basic as an agenda. And so that little change makes a monumental difference in our ability to execute well.
Yeah, I will take a simple, easy win any day of the week. We don't sometimes things are hard and this is a hard business, but that was one where I was like, all right, we can check this box real quick. Yeah.
I want to talk about the turnover retention because for me, there's twofold. You're speaking about it slightly from a different angle with a customer retention, but I think a lot of businesses find retention in 2 ways that impact their bottom line. The customer retention, which is what you had, and that employee retention piece. And I keep telling CEOs that there's a cost to turnover. If you lose a person, you're losing productivity. So there's that cost of lost productivity. And then you have the cost of recruiting for the next person. And it's the same thing on the client piece. It's so much cheaper to keep a customer coming back than to have to find a new customer. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think, this is such conventional wisdom. And yet, sometimes like when we talk about change management or changing our minds, we get these like tire ruts in our brain. And we just, especially in classical music, it's so hard for folks to get past, we need new audiences, even though it's like the data show they're coming. We got to get them back. It's cheaper to retain a customer than get a new one. And it is like, there's a real shift happening in the industry, but there are some where it's just so difficult to think otherwise. Similar to the point you were making on employee retention. Right. Some people, it's just hard for them to get past that it will save us money and make us more productive and actually earn more money if we keep our people and have for all the right reasons. And, but I don't know what to say.
I suspect you've had, and you just made me think, because I suspect you've had this conversation with the leaders and the organizations that you represent, both on the client and the employee. I hear managers often say, well, that employee, they're not that great at this one specific item. And so they want to terminate that employee. And my position is, and everything else they're really good at, but the manager get hung up on that one part. And my position is work with them on that piece because they're good at everything else. There is such a bigger cost to finding someone else. And you don't know if that person is going to do the other parts well. You're better off keeping that person and working with them on where they need improvement. Same thing with the customer. I presume you probably have that analysis. Well, this customer didn't renew or come back, so we're going to take them off of our list. It's like, no, let's figure out how we can connect with them differently. And maybe they'll come back. We shouldn't just write them off completely because they didn't come out that second time.
Exactly. And I think it's being strategic about what list do we keep them on? Because sometimes the problem is then they keep getting solicited for a donation. There are organizations I've been to once, Ronnie, and I still get like the letter in the mail asking me for a donation. And I'm like, that is not the right play here, folks, So yes, let's invite them back, but invite them back to like a performance or something. They might actually seems like an easier step for them.
That, or even some, and I'm sure you've done this, just come to an open house. We're going to open up. You can see behind the curtains and see what it's like. And that is really, it costs you nothing, but it's a way to get them back in the door and at top of mind.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. This is where, I do a lot with my clients of like, what's the babyest step? Right. Like, can they follow us on social media? Can they, that's a step. Can they listen to a playlist we put out on Spotify of our orchestra? Even that is like, just the tiniest step in the right direction toward engagement with the organization.
So you mentioned Spotify. I want to come back to that. I'd love to hear what you're doing on social media and where you're guiding the organizations to broaden their audience. What are you seeing with Gen Z, with your younger audience?
Gen Z is... Some of this is still being formed because they're coming into adulthood right now as we speak. There was a recent study that came out by Eventbrite, and they're a ticket selling platform. And they did a big just ticket buyer analysis combined with some qualitative analysis of Gen Z. And what they found was that this is the pendulum of our universe swinging back. Gen Z wants live experiences. We had the pendulum swing toward, with the millennials, which I'm like one of the oldest millennials on the planet, but it was like, the digital age, and we consumed everything on the screen. And then pandemic, of course, we really only could do things on the screen for a while. And then now Gen Z is like, enough of that. I want in-person experiences and I want live experiences. So for a performing arts organization, this is incredible, generational proclivity that we're talking about. So that's thing one. The other thing they want is some surprise element. And that is a bit new and different. They want to feel like you can call it surprise and delight, but like the example that came to my mind is for anybody who watched the Super Bowl this year, the headline of the halftime show was Bad Bunny, but then what happened? Lady Gaga shows up and the internet collectively went nuts. Lady Gaga is also at the halftime show. And that's where my mind went, of this idea of like, oh, shoot, we cannot recreate this moment. That is a one-time amazing thing that happened. It was a total surprise. Everybody was happy about it. And that's what that like data point from their study made me think of. So that's what we're learning about Gen Z. And I don't think any of that flies in the face of what older generations want as well. We all still want some collective shared experience. And that is great news for performing arts organizations.
Very nice. Well, I definitely want you to come back for our conversation again. And I'd like to continue the conversation on the next episode. I'd love to speak about your book. I'd love to talk about social media and where you got it. But I'd also love to get into some of the technical details on how you help companies, to your book, run it like a business. And so I'd love to get into some of those. And then I want to make sure we talk about your work and scope of businesses, because you work with startups and companies as big as $300 million from what I've read. So, but I want, before we close this one out, I want to say this, that I recently had the experience of going to a live concert. It was the Bridgerton Candlelight concert. I don't know if you've been tracking those.
Oh, I totally know these. Yeah. Tell me everything, Ronnie.
It was
What did you
fantastic.
think?
It was absolutely incredible. And we stayed after. We paid extra for the pictures. So I have to admit to our users that they're going to shoot me. Any of my friends are going to shoot me for this, but we paid extra. So we had the tickets, and then we got the tickets for the pictures afterwards. They took the picture on their cell phone and then they printed it on a device right there. I can't remember the cost, but I know it was a nice upsell. Like this. But we enjoyed the experience so much. And the picture, we've got it displayed and on our shelf someplace, but it was great.
Oh, I love it. I love that they built, this is the name of the game. Yes, you went to a concert and it's about the music, but they built this experience around it and empowered you to take pictures, which you probably shared with others, which then means word of mouth marketing for them. I could go on and on. I think there's so much there as like a little mini case study, and I love it that you loved it.
Right. And what's neat about Bridgerton, I've not spoken about them on air, but how they take music and make it instrumental only of popular songs. Yeah. Very well done. Absolutely incredibly well done. So anyway, I love the arts, by the way, and I love music and orchestra and symphonies and the like. So I appreciate what you're doing to help them survive and succeed. So I appreciate you coming on our program. So thank you for joining us on the Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman.
Stay ahead of the curve. Subscribe right now. We will see you at the next episode.